Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Today, we are going to be talking about communication.
Indeed.
So, this is a great one. I've got lots to say. I don't really know where to begin. Well, I'll begin where I always feel like, one of the big ones we always say is don't go to bed angry. And I always say, no, go to bed angry. Don't talk about things when you're in a heightened emotional state. Wait till you've calmed down. And often if you go to bed and you're sort of upset or a bit pissed off about something, you wake up in the morning, you're like, well, that wasn't a big deal. Why did I get so upset about that? So I often say, just if tensions are high or somebody's mood is low, just wait till everybody settles a little bit before having serious conversations. And sometimes people are afraid about that because they think, oh, well, now it's past, I don't want to drag it up again. So they don't want to ruin the moment if you're feeling good again. But that's the time to actually, I think, have really good communication and talk about things from a responsive perspective, not a reactive perspective. So how about you?
Well, it's funny because when you said about don't go to bed angry, the thing that came into my mind as a joke I remember hearing a while ago was, no, go to bed angry because the sex is better.
Oh.
However, getting back to the point.
Really, that is another show. Okay.
Indeed, that's on another show. I agree with you. Definitely the idea of, like, in the heat of the moment, oftentimes we're not in our right mind, so to speak, to articulate what we're feeling. Yes, it's important to acknowledge the emotion and the upset if that's what's going on. And there's a meme I've seen many times recently where, the worst thing a man can say to a woman is to say, calm down.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So when either one of the people is upset, regardless of gender, acknowledging it's there is first. But to process it in the moment can be really challenging. So I agree with you, the idea of letting it settle a little bit. It's like it's easier to sail when the oceans are calmer than when they're stormy. So to be able to take a moment and know there's going to be a discussion, that's the other part. It's also good to say, when the anger's there, we will talk about this when it's easy to talk about it, sort of thing. Because the challenges for many people is they think if they're not going to talk about it then, they never will. So by putting an appointment together, like making an agreement, is a good part of it too. And yes, when the emotional overload has settled down a bit, whether it is after sleeping or later in the day or when you get together next time, ideally both partners, because we talked a lot in this journey about how we can become self-aware, both partners in this point have had a chance to look at their own part of the participation, their own feelings, their own upset, their own wounding, and realize what the truth really is, because it may not be what they first thought. That's the other part too, about taking time, because oftentimes when we get upset and angry, it's not because of what happened in the moment. It's because it sort of rubbed a sore spot on something that was already sore from before.
Exactly.
A different situation entirely. So it's good to take a breather to get ready, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're triggered, and I'm a 3 principles practitioner, and we often say don't trust your thinking when you're in a low mood, because you will. You might have been triggered by something that happened, but sometimes that rush of strong feelings are coming, as you say, from that old wound, and being able to sort of let yourself settle down to really sort out, is it that old wound that got triggered, or is it something that really needs to be discussed, but discussed from a cool, calm, level-headed space. And then the other thing too is to really, and this is so basic, but some people still don't do it, and that's to really sort of come from the place of this is the way I'm feeling, rather than the you statements. You always, and especially when we catastrophize and make it these big sweeping statements like you always do this, and
right.
But to just, instead of sort of telling the other person what they're doing, what they're thinking, what they're, just diagnosing them and making them wrong, to really just talk about the effect it's having on you. Like you can simply say, when this happens, I feel this way.
So that is key. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's Sorry, after you.
No, I was just about to say, and not even like the when you do this, that I feel
Yeah,
it's still like when this happens again without the labeling, because it is a two-way. It takes two to do this, whatever that dance was. So
right,
it's simply saying when this occurs, I feel this way, and
right.
the other person is so. And this is another one. I just want to bring this up. When I first learned to really sort of not be in the moment and to like my sons would maybe snap at me or something and I used to be like, don't you snap at me, how dare you. And when I
Hmm.
realized that that's not the time to address the situation, it was amazing when I didn't react in the moment. I waited for my son to calm down. I didn't even need to say anything. They came to me and said,
Yeah,
I'm so sorry I snapped earlier. I was frustrated about so and so. And it's amazing when we don't rush in to blame and attack somebody. The other person has time to settle down and own their own behavior,
yeah,
not being defensive because they're feeling they're attacked.
right. In fact, I would say that the biggest practice is to not take things personally,
Oh,
because that's the trap we fall into, is we take it personally. And like you were saying with your son in that instance, he realized that what was triggering him, what was upsetting him, was something else entirely. It wasn't due to you.
mm-hmm.
So you were basically in the line of fire, so to speak, versus being the real target.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenges that we oftentimes, when we're the recipient, we then jump into the fight and make it worse because we think somehow it's all our fault now and we get upset. But something you said earlier about the shifting of language away from, you do this to me, to when this happens, I feel this, is one of the biggest steps to get out of what we talked about many episodes ago about codependency. Because codependency is a place where we end up making other people responsible for our feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And in that upset feeling, upset expression, upset moment, if we learn, remember, practice how to stay centered and how to stay present in what's happening, it's one of the biggest gifts we can give to ourselves and each other, and it frees us from the codependent trap. One of my teachers talks about, Alison Armstrong's one of my favorite teachers, talks about the for men with women, it's truly masculine and feminine behavior. But when a woman is upset, like she's a really rough ocean, and our role as the masculine partner, as a man, in the normal, in that, and I'm using generalities here just to be clear for anybody listening, is that our job is to be the lighthouse, immovable, solid, unreactive, but holding the space so she can basically find her way back in a way. So what happens, and this is not to say that women are always doing this, but a lot of times when a woman's upset in a heterosexual relationship, oftentimes the man would try and shut her down or run away or deflect what she's saying or try to overpower it. And none of those are effective. When a woman is upset, and this is something I've learned the hard way as well, is my job is to be present and not do anything to change anything. Because my challenge also, because of the work I've done over the years and being a coach and a guide and everything else, is I tend to have this tendency to want to fix things. And many men feel that way too. So recognizing that it's not a job to fix either, but just to witness and to be a place that isn't taking things personally, almost like, I'm not saying visual, not do it physically, but almost like martial artists where you deflect things, they come at you, sort of things. Like just realizing it's not about you, you're holding the space, can be a transformational experience in your relationships.
Yeah. Well, my feminist side is coming out now a bit.
No, I can feel it.
I know. I went to an Alison Armstrong class once, and yes, it was quite interesting. I think she's along the same lines as Pat Allen, and but see, when you're saying that, I have so many clients that feel so responsible. They have codependency, and they feel so responsible to always sort of make everybody else feel better. And I have to try and say, you're actually trying to make yourself feel better because you're uncomfortable with somebody
Right.
else being out of control. But
Yes.
so I often coach my female clients. I have male clients too, but my female clients is to just stay centered, just as you say, grounded and centered. Don't get in there. Don't try and control somebody else's experience. If they're
Right.
allowed, and like you said earlier, oh my God, it's like sticking a stick of dynamite up somebody when you start saying, calm down, you know, just
It's a visual identity.
down
Thank you.
now. You're being oversensitive. It's like, Like, no, 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 no. But if you just remain calm and just allow the other person knowing, again, it's the three principles thing that we say we know that everybody will return to that state of well-being, to that settled state, much quicker than if we try and control them, show them what they're doing wrong, or fix them, or whatever it is. And again, we're doing that out of our own discomfort with other people's
Yes,
emotions. So if we can
right,
just learn to take care of ourselves, know that it's not time to discuss this, let the other person settle down, and then you can have a conversation. And again, the other one I always think is so important is, as a mother, I always check with my sons, always, like, if they want to talk, I'll say, um, do you want to just let off steam, or are you looking for help with this? And it's so
mhm,
our kids are like very clear. Mum, I want help with this, or no, I just want to let off steam. And I completely and utterly respect, and I can keep my mouth shut. I will not be the mother. I will not be dispensing advice or anything like that. That's
right,
another thing I think we really have to be aware of, that our wisdom speaks to us. Our wisdom or intuition or whatever you want to call it is for us. It's not for other people. They've got their own wisdom. They've got their own inner voice, their own guidance system. So just, see that in them, reflect that back, that they are, they've got everything they need inside them, that they're going to settle down, they're going to figure this out. Again, as I say, unless they ask you for your advice, but to be really respectful of other people's experience. And just because you see it differently doesn't mean it's right.
correct, absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I want to expand this a little bit because the piece also came up for me to my communication, because I hope people get this first piece and take it home with them. This is real valuable. But this other piece also is relevant. Is we have moved as a society out of the tendency for direct communication. Almost everything's done by text now, and even now beyond that, it's gone to emojis now. Which is just such a reduction or reductive way of communicating. And then we end up making, when people have breakups because of three emojis they put in their text, there's
Mhm,
no communication there. Something's definitely wrong with that. And so, for those listening, this is something I learned a long time ago, and the numbers have shifted percentage wise, but something like 93% of our communication is non-verbal.
oh yeah, it's body language for
So,
sure.
right, and facial expression and the way we move and everything else. So first of all, if you're on a phone call, not a video chat even, if you're on a phone call, that means you're going to get at most 7% of the person's communication through what they say. If you take to a text message, it's maybe 1% of that,
Hmm.
because all the tonality, the timbre, all the other stuff has gone away as well. So to recognize that texting, if you don't understand somebody's text, say, can we jump on the phone and talk, or can we meet in person, something like that? Because frankly, we make such assumptions, because we talked about that before. We make such assumptions about how people communicate based on what we think they're saying.
Hmm.
And when it's a text message of, a small sentence or two emojis, we end up making a whole massive assumptions about what was said. And the other person would just, but sidebar for a second, being English, as I know you probably know this too, we have a level of sarcasm the Americans don't understand.
Just about to say that.
So when we say things in text, the intonation is what we're thinking we're saying, but what they're reading is something different. So it's
Absolutely.
vital we make sure we communicate clearly, because it's
Yeah.
such a challenge.
Gosh, texting, I know, to me, it's like, what is the point? Pick up the phone, especially when they're, are you free on this day or this day? And you go back, and I'm like,
Yeah, logistics. Yeah.
just just pick up the phone. But
Hmm.
I love what you're saying, and it's so true. I happen to like emojis because I can be, have my British sense of humor, and I have to put like a laughing face after it so that people get that
Right.
I'm actually making a
Disclaimer.
joke. It's not
Yeah.
serious. But I agree with you. Yeah, texting can. Oh, it's just like you said. I mean, it's fine, very quick. What time you're going to get here, something like that. But yeah, the room for misunderstanding is huge. And
Right.
but there was something you said earlier. I'm just trying to think what it was. Oh, gone as usual. What it has to be a show with me forgetting what I was going to say at some point or another. Oh, I know what it was. I wanted to say about communication as well. I always say that n- any emotion you have is completely appropriate. Don't ever judge yourself for having an emotion. But
Mm.
what I do think we need to be incredibly responsible with is our response to our emotions. So I can feel really angry and really pissed off and whatever it is, but I don't, I allow that emotion to move through me. It's energy. It needs to be up and out. I say there's no point in stuffing it down and putting a lid on it and it festers. But having a feeling does not mean that you have the right to then, put that feeling on another person or
Yeah.
blow them out the water or whatever it is. We have to
Right.
be responsible. So let that energy move through you, but don't act on it, and act on it as coming from a responsive place, not the reactive place. But what I also wanted to mention is just honestly, just being, it's a for agreements thing, but it's be impeccable with your word. There, you
Hmm.
cannot. When I was in Kabbalah, we were teaching children, and we got a salt cellar and a pepper shaker, and we said like the whites, the sweet, being kind to each other, kind words, and the black pepper is or the negative or hurtful or bad words we can do. Then we mixed it into a bowl, and then we mixed it all around, and then we said to the children, okay, so now you're sorry for what happened, now take all the black pepper out. And you can't. You can
Right.
sit there and pick it out as much as you can, but you're not going to get every bit out. And our words said in anger can really leave a really deep wound. So
Yeah.
especially in relationships, it's just, you can say, I feel angry right now, I am really upset, but that's owning your own experience. That's not
Right.
attacking and tearing down another human being and blaming them. So I think that's so important to remember, to really keep that, I call it the bank account of goodwill, which is, yes, we all get upset with each other, but don't destroy it. Don't, I used to feel in one relationship I had, whereas our fights would be so terrible. It would feel like there was a vase that would just get smashed, and then we'd pick up the pieces and glue them together again. Then another argument, and it gets smashed again. And in the end, the fragments are so small, you can't glue it back together again. The damage is done, it's irreparable. So I think that's a very, very important thing to keep in mind too. Obviously, we're going to have disagreements. Obviously, we're going to get angry. We're human, but it's what we do
Yeah.
with that anger.
That's true. And that's it. Then one piece I want to say too, because there is a sense of, you know, the idea about, what you say is none of my business sort of thing. Don't take it personally type thing.
Hmm.
At the same time, does not mean you let the person who's upset off the hook. So if somebody is upset, if you get upset with somebody, if you aren't willing to clean up your mess afterwards, if you're not willing to say, I apologize for how it came across, it wasn't meant to be that way, especially if you don't, because the other thing is also what you said is true. It is about us when we get upset. The other person may have, it's like Velcro. They have hooks to pull in
Hmm.
your upset, even though it wasn't about them. They take it personally. So it's good to check in afterwards to make sure that what you said didn't leak into their feelings, so they didn't take on upset as well, because that's just clean communication and honoring yourself with somebody else. There's something else I want to add as well. This again, shifting gears, because there's so much. I mean, communication can take 4 episodes at least.
Exactly.
But something to this is when you're trying to understand each other. One of the things that I've become aware of, this I learned through NLP years ago, was how we communicate our style and a way we like to language things. For example, because the reason being is because oftentimes, if you've read the Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman, that sort of speaks the same idea. There's a premise about the fact that we don't always communicate on the same level in our relationships. And with the idea of NLP, but in simple terms, the communication is a visual, a kinesthetic, and an auditory flavor. I'm using that way intentionally because I'm not going to get into technicalities, which means that we use certain words.
Hmm.
So when somebody is conversation said, do you see what I mean? That's a visual cue, obviously. When say someone says, does that ring a bell for you? That's an audio turn, or how does it make you feel? These are all different layers of that thing. And the reason I'm saying this is because oftentimes, if you're a different um, sensory modality than somebody else, so you speak in visual terms, the other person speaks in feeling terms, you might not actually understand each other without realizing it. So the awareness to listen, and it's funny, I posted something on Facebook last night, this morning, about, do we really listen to hear, or do we listen to react?
Absolutely.
Just get to a second, that one will have a big piece on. But this idea is that when you hear somebody, do you really hear what they're saying or just hearing what you think they're saying? So it's always good to check that you actually verify, like to do a perception check.
Yeah.
So to say, is what you said this? So I want to make sure I heard what you're saying. So it's important to communicate clearly too.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, and it's so true. And a couple of things that you said that I want to react to, which is absolutely. I mean, as coaches, we're perception checking all the time. We've got to
Yeah.
really make sure that we're understanding our client and not just
Yes.
going off on some sort of assumption. I mean, it's constant check-in, perception
Hmm.
checking, reframing, saying back what you think you heard, and just say, am I getting this right? Is this what you meant when you said this? And yeah, it's such an important skill. That, like I say, we're fortunate because we learn it in our capacity of the work that we do. But in any
Right.
relationship, it's so important to do that. And then the other
Hmm.
one you said was hmm,
Yeah,
the other one,
come back.
the other one. But what I was also like, I'll go on to something else and come back to that when it dawns on me again. But also, if you're communicating something that's difficult or challenging, never do it. Like even with my children, if there was something going on, I would always say, sweetheart, I need you in the kitchen. If if just never publicly humiliate anybody. If you have something to say, that's going back to that thing is, sometimes people are misbehaving. It's not just your perception. There is actually behavior that's really hurtful or damaging or whatever. But just pull that
Right.
person aside. Don't publicly humiliate them. Just say, this is, I'm having a hard time with this situation or whatever it is. Or but you have to address it, but again, respect. Just have respect. Be because I remember my mother used to just, she would publicly shame people, and
Mm.
and that to me was just, oh, don't ever do that. It's just, especially as a child, you just want to curl up and die. It's like, you can give them feedback on their behavior, but do it in a respectful way. And children, especially, when you respect them, they'll respect you back. So, that communication starts really, really young with especially with
Absolutely.
children.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is that to make it more complicated, is that we all come from an upbringing, family, some dynamic. So when we're adults in relationship, the ability to communicate clearly is quite a struggle, it seems like. So I just want to make sure people get that what we're talking about here is not simple languaging of things. It's recognizing that the filters we learned as kids from our own parents' communication methodologies influence the way we communicate as an adult. So you meet somebody else who has their own background. Something like, Martians speaking to Venusians. It's like, how do we communicate? So it's good to really set up some ground rules and a sense of someone establishing translations in a way, because and not even talking about like John Gray's Mars and Venus idea. We do communicate differently. The way the masculine communicates, the way the feminine communicates is different. So this idea of communication isn't something you just throw flippantly away. It's like there's a lot to think about here, and to take it and not to take it seriously, but to make it part of the work. Make it enjoyable. Frankly, it's just like this is fun to learn about somebody's way of communicating.
Mm.
That would be a great way to approach somebody.
It's so funny because, it's so funny because like I said, I grew up without a father. I grew up with a very strong mother, and I'm
Right.
very, very aware of my masculine in me, and I'm very aware of my partner's feminine. So
Hmm.
when you say masculine and feminine, I tend to not think of it as, men versus women. I tend to think
Right.
of the masculine energy and the female energy that exists within all of us. And there's times that, like, I was at a meeting last week, and somebody says something like, men. It was a Toastmasters. It was the first time I'd gone there, but I went, and the topic was women, and somebody said
Hmm.
something like, um, you know, men should be encouraged to be more like women and cry a lot. I'm just so, really? That's the first thing you think of when you talk about the feminine, is that women cry and men don't? It's
Right.
such a, oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't I never cry in arguments and things like that. I think I just get a bit fierce. But I cry when I watch the news. Cry when I see horrific things going on in the world. That's where I cry. But I don't sort of. But the implication was, women, resort to tears, and strong men should be. And I just was like, oh, this is not my
No.
thing.
So let me respond to what you said, though, just
Yeah.
so you understand where I'm coming from, too, and for the audience as well. I talk about masculine and feminine. As a general rule, they do reside in the male and female genders.
Hmm.
However, as I've learned over the years, because there are many women who are very masculine and many men who are very feminine. And it's also not necessarily about sexuality either, because there are many straight men who are feminine and many straight women who are masculine. And also, there's also gay relationships too. But the reason I would say it is because the energetics of masculinity and the energetics of femininity have certain traits to them,
Hmm.
which basically, depending on where we are at the time, because the spectrum is very fluid, so we can move from masculine to feminine during the day, depending on what we're doing. So it's what you said about you and your fiance is not unusual. It's kind of normal in a sense to see those parts of each other.
Hmm.
So for me, the understanding is that when somebody's in their masculine, it tends to be more directed, more like getting to the point, straight line, that's the answer, boom, very simplistic in that sense. Whereas the feminine energy tends to be more embellishing and more decorative and also more inclusive.
Um,
So there's like listening to somebody speak, independent of the gender,
hmm.
you can tell what energy they're in by how they speak. So it's a really interesting conversation to be in to understand people's way of presenting. So yes,
That
that's to be clear, it's not the other.
exactly, and that's next show. We got to go deeper into this. Really,
I think that will come up.
oh, yeah, we're going to dive deep into that. But I do remember now what it was you were saying earlier.
Oh, good. I'm good.
Take a while. But yes, it's that. It's so upsetting when you start to say something and the other person interrupts or finishes
Oh,
your sentence for you,
yeah.
or is chomping at the bit. It's like, and I mean, I have to say, I love my fiance dearly, but I constantly have to say, could you just wait till I finished?
Hmm.
Because, and I'm very direct. I'm a short thing. He's the one that will embellish and go all over the place. This feminine
Right.
energy, but
Hmm.
he's has this. I can see his mind working, and he's not listening because he's formulating his responses based on like the first two words I've said, and
Yeah.
it's a I think it's almost a ADHD thing that it's like his mind's going so fast because he's the sweetest person on earth. He doesn't mean to be rude or to be, but it's something he almost can't help. Um, but it's something I think we should all practice, which is to be real, as you said, really present to the other
Hmm.
person when they're speaking and let them finish what they were going to say.
Yeah. I think, and yes, absolutely. But I think I suspect in a way. See, okay, I can't. No, I was going to say I was going to line up with the genders, and like, no, it doesn't work that way. But what I do know is that I think maybe it's true for, I know it's true for me, maybe it's true for other men too, is that when somebody starts talking to us, we may get ideas and we're worried we're going to forget them. So we almost hold on to it too tightly. So we don't hear the rest of the thing they're saying. It's not against the other person, just that we worry about our own memory ability to remember at the end of the conversation something back at the beginning that we heard that we were responding to. So I understand that. And yes, absolutely agree with you though, because I've learned more and more that if I just let go and listen all the way through, what needs to be said at the back will come through naturally anyway. But I had to learn to trust that part because, yes, to fully receive somebody by having them speak as they want to speak and communicate so that I actually hear them without any um, self, there's an interesting word I was going to use. No, I won't use that word, it won't fit. But it's basically a self adjustment so we don't actually hear the other person anymore because we're preparing our own answer. That's a dangerous place to play for the relationship. It's so important that we do spend time open and listening and receptive to our partners.
Yeah, it really is, and there's this is such a huge topic. We're going to be running out of time, but this is something that it really is, and I'd love to just end on that note of practicing listening without jumping in to give advice, to fix, to be heard. Some people just have to be heard. They want to, their opinion to be out there, even though it wasn't asked for. And I think just really, just again, just put the brakes on a bit and just learn to just really take the other person in, and check with them. Say,
Yeah,
do you want my input, or are you just sharing something with me? I mean, those are vital, I think, to good communication.
yeah, absolutely. It's funny because just a quick one to say on that. I'm in a coaching program right now, and my coach and I were talking. a couple of days ago, Saturday, and she has this set up in the situation is does she have agreement with us in the group that we go to the deepest place we can go, and does she have the permission to interrupt us wherever she wants to? Because she gets hits all the time and ideas. And I say yes to that. And every single time she's cut me off, it's been worth it. But she's the only person I've done that with. Because the thing is, that's something that you don't do assume with people. So your point about asking the person before they talk, do you want me to give you answers or guidance or support, or you want me just to listen, can really change the paradigm of communication. So I think it's a powerful way to be receptive to somebody else's sharing. So yeah, that's a vital thing to you remember, frankly.
Yeah. Well, great. So we will end on that for today.
Yes.
And next week, we're going to go deeper into this masculine and feminine.
I had a feeling it was going to come up soon.
Yeah. All right, then we'll have a wonderful week, everybody. And same to you, Barry. Thank you for joining us, everybody. And I will see you next week.
Thank you, Del. And we'll see everybody next week.
Lovely. Bye.
Bye. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.